2, 1, and we are recording episode 560 with Dr. Ken Alibek, and the first time Dr. Alibek's back here since the post-YouTube era, in which we have been wrongfully banned. But I don't care; the party is going to keep going. Dr. Alibek and I have done several episodes, some with translators, some with different patients of yours or mothers of patients of yours, about autism, the treatments of autism. And Dr. Alibek, you are working feverishly and with the patience of a saint at finding a cure for this, how to prevent it, how to break the vicious cycle of it. Your youngest daughter has autism, and you are putting your full brain power, which is not something to scoff at curing this. And you are 100 times more intelligent than I am, so I have to try hard to keep up with you. But Dr. Alibek, what are we talking about today?
Tommy, thank you very much for your time, first of all, because it's so great you have some opportunity to tell some parents and maybe physicians what autism is, and strictly from scientific standpoint. And just explaining all this stuff in great detail, I hope people will start getting more understanding what autism is and how autism can be treated. Like, actually, it's not just how it can be treated, what I do to treat autism. And because I'm licensed and my diploma and my license, let me say, in the former Soviet Union countries, my knowledge and my expertise and my treatments, my patients are in those countries from this point. And of course, my dream is to see maybe there are some physicians stay in the States or some other places in the world who would understand the general principle and how autism can be treated. Autism is treatable. I would say even more. Autism is curable. Unfortunately, yes, I don't want to make, let me say, any sensational things. I mean, but it's important to me to explain and tell, for example, why people do not understand what's happening in case of autism, and why it's growing, why I would say autism is becoming a kind of epidemic problem at this point, and what should be done. I mean, because there is nothing fantastic if we understand what autism is and how it can be treated. And today, I will try to explain autism from a kind of multidisciplinary point of view. In this case, because it looks like this is the biggest thing people cannot comprehend. And based on this principle, I will try to explain, for example, what a certain physician would see or scientist would see in case of autism. And it looks like this is the major thing I'd like to explain today.
Okay. And real quick, can you come a little closer to your laptop? Your microphone's not picking up your voice.
Okay.
Much better now. Yeah. Okay. All right, we're good.
Okay. I'll try to sit. Maybe just I need to be more focused and sit closer.
Oh no. Hey man, it took me like 200 episodes to realize you're fine. So what we've talked about in last episodes is how, if I recall correctly, you've described it as almost a sort of cycle. Like once you get into one thing, it causes the next, which causes the next, right? It's like trees growing and they get leaves and the leaves fall and the leaves turn into soil and the soil causes trees. And it's like this cycle that there's no single one way to break it. But if you can break it, you can break the cycle. Is that correct?
That's correct. But today I will try to take a look at this problem, this disorder, using a different approach. I would call it a multidisciplinary approach. Let's imagine we have a very big group of physicians. Physicians having different specialties, okay? And what they usually see in case of autism or in some situations predisposing autism. And that's why, for example, we cannot find a kind of comprehensive view of autism because each physician of having a certain specialty would see something in his or her field. Okay, and I would proceed from this point. Going back to our talk last time, you remember this, so you mentioned yourself that at different stages of development, autism would look different. And children would look different. Children would behave different. I mean, and each year, these kids are developing, they will start producing some new symptoms. And even without treatment, they are becoming different. Applying some treatment because when parents are looking for possible treatment, they use so many different methods, different supplements, different neuroleptics, or some psychotropic medications. And what kind of role these medications are playing, nobody can answer because there is no kind of systemic or systematic approach to understand what actually is happening. Not immediately after these kids they start taking these medications. What's happening afterwards? And you mentioned that my youngest daughter, Mary, she's having autism, and it's interesting. It looks like I already talked about this. I would never study autism unless my daughter had autism.
Sure.
It's because to me, autism was far beyond my interest at all. And even now, for example, when I study autism, for many physicians, it's a matter of getting some grants. Let me say, it's good. Getting some funding, establishing some foundations. It's treatment, studying molecular mechanisms, studying pathological pathways, anatomic changes, physiological changes, and so on and so forth. And but I'm taking this problem, let me say, from my own heart. Let me use this.
Well, I would agree with you that it's often the things that we're interested in, or that we have passion in, they have to come from something. There's a difference between interest and from the heart, as you said. I do a lot of episodes on this podcast with military guys, talk about space, talk about whatever. But and as I've told you, in 2014, I lost a sibling to suicide. And I've suffered with depression on and off in my life, but never enough to the point where I am viciously interested in it. But since I lost my brother, that is now a lifelong goal of mine. And as you just said, from the heart. From the mind, I like to talk about planes and bombs and space and aliens. From the heart, I know that there's something deep down I want to do with mental illness. So it's the same with you. You have a very colorful and interesting and intelligent past, but like you said, autism was probably never on the radar for something you wanted to study. And then it comes into your life. How much closer to your heart can you get than your youngest daughter? Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Tommy, sometimes I'm trying to go back to the time when Mary was diagnosed with autism. And you can imagine my feeling. At that time, let me say, she didn't produce any dramatic symptoms. Just something like this. Just strange walking, then I wouldn't repeat all these symptoms. To me, I looked at her, and when I talked to some physicians, they said, okay, I shouldn't worry because she would overgrow all the symptoms and would become probably a normal person in the future. And but time was passing by. Each time, for example, just when I was remembering and looking at her changes, I was noticing what physicians told me was not true. She was getting from more or less acceptable state to getting worse. and then getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, let me say, just when it came to the point that we found out how many problems she had, inability of normal speaking, I mean, just a full absence of communication abilities, symbolic, let me say, behavior, repeated behavior, let me say, restricted behavior. It is just kind of classic set of symptoms. But in addition to this, she started developing many symptoms which are not pretty well described. I mean, she had sensory problems and skin, for example. It was not possible to get haircut for her.
Mm-hmm.
It was not possible for her, let me say, just to wash, to take shower, because she was highly sensitive. It was not possible for her, let me say, to wear normal clothes, because she wouldn't be able to wear certain clothes. I mean, just as she hated, let me say, different text on the clothes. And then just this is just it's a small number of dozens of hundreds of different, I mean, symptoms and signs. I mean, then we noticed her walking was different. I mean, she was walking a little bit different way. Then we noticed she didn't have, let me say, we call them, I mean, her motor problems, because it was difficult for her, let me say, to keep a pen or a pencil. Then many things, let me see, losing abilities to count, reading, and so on and so forth. It was just, you know, just when you see this in front of your eyes, you are in shock, everyday shock that your lovely kid is losing her ability, let me say, by days, by months, and so on and so forth. And you know, but at some point she was diagnosed, let me say, with a severe form of autism, let me say, and a mental disability, severe mental disability. You know, just okay, we thought it was our destiny. But suddenly we started noticing, but it was before some hyperacoustic changes. I mean, because she started covering her ears. I mean, just when she heard some loud sounds. Then we noticed, because her, let me say, diapason, let me say, of hearing was different, because when we came to Pittsburgh and we saw some dolphins, and I noticed she was hearing, let me say, we didn't hear anything, but just two, let me say, creatures. I mean, just two, because we had a dog, and our dog and Mary heard some sounds we didn't hear.
Oh, wow.
The dog was, let me say, just absolutely, I mean, distressed. He was trying to understand, I mean,
that high-pitched, high want. Yeah.
Correct.
Wow.
And we didn't hear anything and she heard it.
Wow.
And, you know, just, and you can imagine it's every day, every week would bring you some new understanding. I mean, then she started, I mean, having, you know, just, I wouldn't even repeat, because to me it was for the first time I noticed two things. Knowing some other kids, I mean, just my wife was taking Mary with me to some therapeutics or therapies, I would say, and I saw some other kids, and I saw differences. I mean, yes, they behave different, they look different, and so on. Mary started developing, to say, a different. She was a slim girl, but she started developing. She started getting fat, you see, and becoming more depressed. I mean, just and eating much and these type of things. And I saw some other kids who would be slim, no appetite, and so on and so forth. Autism, let's say, two different phases of autism. Then she started developing. She started growing very fast, and at certain time she started developing some kyphotic changes, let me say, in her, let me say, just it's spinal her spine. And this is just again, nobody can answer this question. Then we noticed her body shape started changing. I mean, she became, let me say, old, hormone imbalance type of body. okay because it's I mean accumulation of fat in certain area, let me say, and lower fat in some other area. She started developing polycystic ovary syndrome. I mean, this and some gastrointestinal problems. Then over time, we started noticing that her hyperacusis became so severe, and it was not possible to come outside. I mean, then she started developing kind of the condition which I would consider a person with, let me say, with unbelievable violent behavior. And initially, it was not possible to understand what was happening. But to me, it was getting clear because during this same time I was reading, let me say, and working, let me say, with some, I started working with some patients. I was trying to find some solutions for my daughter. But because I'm not licensed in the United States, I mean, just, I can give a suggestion to a doctor who would be responsible for treating. Some doctors would accept it, some wouldn't accept it. This kind of general situation of the states, you say, physicians wouldn't accept, for example, even if you suggest something logical, explaining what's happening to a child. And a kind of peak of a problem was when Mary developed the state. You remember I told about this hyperacusis or selective sensitivity, selective sound sensitivity syndrome. This is the most horrible state for a child. And what is absolutely, I would say, shocking to me, why this condition is not appreciated by physicians here in the United States. Even neurologists, audiologists, some of them heard about this. There is even so-called misophonia institute in California. But you can imagine that thousands or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, because we don't know how many of these children exist. They are not, let me say, they're not getting appropriately. There is no study funded, let me say, by good institutions to understand what's happening to these kids. Even now, for example, just having this problem, and these kids, they're absolutely violent. I do remember how Mary was attacking small kids because she didn't like how they spoke, and she didn't like how they, scream. For her, let me say, it was a kind of trigger. Later on, she would even try to attack small kids, because not because they produce some sounds, because as soon as they see them, for example, I noticed, let me say, just that some parents probably know about this. She will start looking very close, let me say, and there is no way for you, let me say, to say, okay, Mary, stop it, because she is like, she's getting to attack, ready to attack. And just so many situations, and just it's getting worse and worse and worse, and just I can continue this the story. And just it resulted, in so many things, like police coming constantly. It looks like this our house was, let me say, just was known to the police in our county, and just anytime. Every other day they would be at our house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then Mary, what's interesting, at some point, can you imagine this? At some point when she became older, she would be calling police herself. And the reason when now I'm asking her, just why you do this? And she said, I felt if the police is not coming, something bad would happen.
Okay.
Can you imagine? She was kind of, she was doing this just as a prevention
for
possible negative things. Now, let me say, after, all things we do, of course, she's different. She's still, let me say, kind of, she's still fragile. But now when she see a child, for example, she wouldn't attack. She would suggest, okay, can you leave this place? Maybe because it's I see some small children. Now when dogs are barking, before she would start throwing stones. Now she would try. Sometimes she forces herself, let me say, to laugh, let me say, turn away, but she would prefer, let me say, not to do anything. And she wouldn't attack anybody. And she doesn't have, let me say, physical aggression any longer. But it took a very long time, and I know how to treat it. And this is the case. And I'm not talking about 2,500 other kids, 2,500. And at this point, I'm having 8 or 9 groups of parents. Each group consists of 250 or so parents and kids. 4 groups in Central Asia, then 3 groups in Russia, 1 group is in Ukraine, and just you can imagine how many kids. I mean, just and there is a talk now about creating some new groups because they have the name Dr. Alibek treatment. This is what they do, and it's a huge line, let me say, and begging, getting a huge amount of requests and so on and so forth. Now, giving this introduction, let me do what I suggested to you in the beginning. Why it's important? Because when we talk about autism, when we analyze autism, you remember at some point I mentioned this type of I mentioned term convergent science. Convergent science would mean, for example, it's a general idea. To study certain, having knowledge in different areas of science and combine them together to create a new knowledge and expertise. But same situation, I would say, this is exactly applicable to autism. But in this particular case, we need to talk about convergent medicine because autism requires knowledge, let me say, in different fields of medicine, and the number of disciplines is huge. But in order not to become, let me say, kind of empty worded, let me try to give, let me say, just this analysis step by step, and what kind of physician or scientist should take a look, or a scientific group, let me say, is doing the study at this point, but cannot get, let me say, this knowledge delivered to some other groups, or to some other officials, or to some other foundations, or to some other foundations or institutions, because let me say, all this, huge number of institutions, scientists, they are working in different fields. They are not combining this knowledge because everybody, in some cases, they want to bring this knowledge, they want to explain, but but other scientists are working in different areas, they have different vision. How can you, for example, people, let me give you this type of example. Let's collect 15 or 20 people speaking different languages. Somebody speaking English, somebody speaking Russian, somebody speaking Spanish, somebody speaking Chinese, and so on and so forth. Get together and say, okay, guys, talk to each other. Can you imagine what's going to happen? Because they will be speaking different languages. They wouldn't understand each other. They would have some attempts to understand. But if, for example, at some point they wouldn't start studying kind of basics of some other languages, let's say, there is no way for them, let me say, to develop or to solve a problem, okay, of communication in this particular case. The same situation is in medicine, let me say, in the field of autism. Autism is not a neurological disease. autism is multifaceted, systemic disorder affecting so many areas, let me say, in the body. Let me say, and all these things, let me say, they are interconnected. And the result, let me say, in the huge number of symptoms we see in the case of autism. But because these things, let me say, they're interconnected, and it's not a static situation. Over time, let me say, all these kids, they're moving in different directions in terms of systems, in terms of pathological changes, in terms of, how this is progressing. And people think in some cases, okay, because when you look, some people say just a big number of children with autism, they improve it. But sorry, guys, what you say is not true. There are no cases of complete treatment. There is no cases of cure.
The thing I can think of is it kind of sounds like when you're talking about all these different systems working together, it's almost like Elon Musk creating Tesla, right? It's like one, you have to get cheap batteries, but it's not just can you make cheap batteries, it's where are you going to get the sources? Well, it's rare earth metals, so you got to get contracts for mining rights in Africa. Well, then it's also you got to pass all this, you got to get by lobbying because other big companies are lobbying against electric cars. And then there's advertising, and then it's, well, they're not using gas stations, they're using chargers. So it's not just one thing, you're balancing like 10 things together to bring forward one thing. And it's not, you can't just make batteries and go, now I'm going to make Tesla. There's so many different things: mining rights, import, export, advertising, lobbying, legislation. Are they deemed safe by the federal transportation, whatever it is? There are all these things lining up in a row, and does it work? There's shareholders. People is there a public, is there initial public offering? What happens when he goes on Joe Rogan and smokes weed? Does the stock plummet? It's this whole, right? It's like the balancing like a plate on top of a stick and juggling. And is that right? Yeah,
it's a great example. But I would give maybe even a more difficult example.
All right.
Let's imagine the same Elon Musk. He is organizing, let me say, his future endeavor to go to Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you can imagine how many things should be collected together from technical standpoint, organizational standpoint. I mean, just within each segment of a problem, we have a big number of other problems. It should be, let me say, combined together. And finally, let me say, this expedition to Mars, let me say, going there, surviving there, coming back, for example, would require so many different things. How much food? I mean, just what to do with radiation?
Yeah.
What's going to happen in the story to people who hate each other in about a year,
just
being together?
Yeah. Do they have a police force? Who's going to break up fights on the far side of Mars, right?
And they will start at some point. They will start hating each other. Such way they will start hitting, killing each other. I mean, so many things. I mean, and this is
so far out.
Yeah, and now you can imagine in the case of autism, and in order not to become empty-worded, let me use specific examples. I mean, but these examples should be specifically focused on, specific medical specialties and what kind of experts we need to have in order to understand autism. Because it's interesting from this point. In autism, it's interesting. I would put this way. Of course, if there was somebody have in mind like Elon Musk, because it's easy to collect, that means all these specialists. Because knowledge is out there. Maybe some details are not known yet, but the principles, let me say, of understanding of autism is already available. I wouldn't say the money spent for studying autism not well spent. You need so much research has been done, and we know so many things at this point from different countries, from different scientific groups. And the biggest problem, there is no somebody, let me say, who is having organizational capability, let me say, and funding and a desire to solve a problem. That's what's happening. And let me explain this from this point. Okay, people say, when we read it, people say autism starts or signs of autism when a child is about 1.5 to 3 years old. I wouldn't talk about all these kind of strange ideas about vaccinations, metals, just at some point when there is a question, I would explain, because all things are explainable very easily. But just I'm not going to talk to people who are conspiracy theory people. Yeah. I'll be talking pure science. And first, what we need to keep, because based on a huge number of cases, that's what I'm saying, because it's not my research, let me say, it's my treatment. I mean, and I'm treating autism not as a disease. I'm treating autism, let me say, based, let me say, on specific presentations of these kids, what's happening to them in terms of etiology, pathogenesis, clinical manifestations, as a result of things, let me say. And based on this, for example, we have first changes we see in a month. Every day, just on this, I'd be happy at some point that my parents know. Every day I see what the last one, I see the information, let me say, from mothers. They talk to each other, I mean, explain what kind of changes. They share, let me say, some concerns. I mean, just, they talk about some labs, which lab would be best, let me say, to have one another test and so on and so forth. But some people live in Moscow, some people live in London, some people live in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, in Kiev, and so on and so forth. And they already, I would say, friends, because they talk to each other and they understand so many things. And it's interesting from this point. When I talk to them, sometimes I'm asking, okay, because they come, some parents are having kids who are 15 years old, 13 years old, 10 years old, 8 years old, 5, 2, 3. And just initially, I never saw parents who would bring children who are just 2 years old, 1.5, or even 1 year old, because after I explain possible symptoms of future autism, they start coming to me saying, okay, just maybe at this stage it's easier to help. Yes, it's much easier. That's why when we talk about future autism, first thing, just because in my opinion, should be good scientists who understand prenatal problems and neonatal problems. The first group, for example, of physician scientists who would be very important to understand what kind of symptoms, signs would, I would say, predispose future autism. In this case, some people say, cesarean section, it's many difficulties. First I would say some infection in the first or second trimester of pregnancy. And just this is my observation, but at the same time there are publications, just from Sweden, from Denmark, studying thousands or even hundreds of thousands of children. They stated, so-called meta-analysis, and they showed that women who gave born, who gave birth to the kids, and they had some infection in the first trimester, let me say, the frequency of autism is much higher, and statistically significant. And this is, and my observation is the same. And when I started doing this work, and even small children, when we start because in the pharmaceutical treatment, it's easier to get tests. Some blood tests, some usually blood tests. And just it's so obvious what kind of infection they have already. Can you imagine this? A child just was born. That is a recently born child already infected. And in this case, I wouldn't discuss some mechanism in these people who understand so-called, so-called microglia activation or chronic neuroinflammation. And they understand what I mean, because that's what we see in these kids. And analyzing blood samples, we can show, what kind of changes are already there. And the only problem is, again, it's strange when we analyze blood parameters and ranges in the form of Soviet Union countries and the United States. I suddenly noticed, just in the United States, these parameters were wider.
Okay.
For me, it was a big surprise. That's why in some cases physicians don't notice it. And the reason I was trying to understand why, it most likely, this is just my reading of this, because it's multi-ethnic country. And you know how these ranges are established? And just they collect, 10,000 of kids or adults. They take blood and analyze them and establish certain ranges. And different ethnicities should be taken into consideration. In so-called in the countries with more narrow multi-ethnicity, for example, these ranges are a little. And what I see, in this case, I see, erythrocyte, red blood cell increase in about 70 cases. That's one sign. I see some signs of, these red blood cells, they have some other sub parameters, and I see that erythrocytes are not able to deliver sufficient amount of oxygen into blood, into the brain. Then I analyze what kind of changes we call them when we analyze blood. There is a principle in medicine, understand the shift into one or another direction, because we have some cells and we call it shift to the right and shift to the left. Shift to the left usually means we have more bacterial or fungal prevalence. Shift to the right, we say it's more viral. And even just it's for physician, maybe for younger generation, it's not, let me say, quite known, but this study, and this understanding was developed so many years ago, and now it looks like not many people are paying attention to it. It is first sign. Just when we try to understand what kind of infections, again, we analyze, and again, it's not just my study. If we go, let me say, to publications, from all over the world. Even 10 years ago, not much information was known. But nowadays, for example, we see publications saying, okay, Lyme disease and autism, Zika virus and autism, herpes simplex and autism, mycoplasma, pneumonia and autism. Then cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus and autism. And that's what we see. And this is an interesting thing. Once I talked to somebody who is actually a good scientist, and she told me, Ken, if you brought me, let me say, a proof that there is a specific virus which is causing autism, would be absolutely happy, and I would believe you. But this is a kind of understanding of the 19th century. There was scientist with the name of Robert Koch, who said this, he developed of postulates.
Mhm.
But these postulates were for traditional infections. Okay, if you infect someone with a certain pathogen, and this person or animal actually is getting diseased, and if you isolate same microbes, same virus, let me say yes, it's a proof that it's infectious disease. But now it's the 21st century. It's a completely different knowledge. It was 150 years after. We have understanding of all infection. We have understanding of inflammation. And we know the mechanism how different viruses and bacteria can cause other conditions which we call systemic infection, systemic inflammation, oxidative stress, and so on and so forth. And even in the scientific literature, we see it. Let me say, in the practical medicine, there is no full understanding of the situation. This is the first part. I would say, saying this, we see that at this stage and later stages, we need to have scientists. I mean, embryologists. We need to have neonatologists. We need to have gynecologists. And just these physicians or scientists with this knowledge should be a part of this multifunctional group, multi-dimensional group.
Can you come closer to your microphone?
Mm-hmm.
You're drifting away on me again.
Okay.
No, you're fine. It gets fuzzy. Dr. Alibek, I gotta use the restroom. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Okay. Is it okay if I go as well?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
We are back. Some people would say leaving a bathroom break in there is unprofessional. I would say it adds realism. Sometimes that happens. You gotta go to the restroom. So thinking about the parameters, how it's wider in the United States. Dr. Alibek, with the parameters that are they're wider in the United States because it's more of the melting pot. Would you be able to do a more like pinpoint autism study in like a super homogenous nation or like an uncontacted island? Maybe that's too small. But if you found like one nation that's like a very homogenous society, would you be able to do a more effective autism study using a much narrower set of parameters?
Absolutely.
Really?
That's why, because all my patients, they are Caucasians, they are Asians, I have a few African. They're not African Americans because we have some African kids. African descent kids, let me say, in Russia, and I have this. And the situation is absolutely identical in terms of treatment. Okay.
Okay.
And just if in this part I specifically mentioned some specialties, just in order not to repeat them, we know what kind of scientists, physicians we need to have for this stage. Then, of course, we need to have developmental physicians. I mean, just in many fields. And specifically, I would come to the point of brain. I mean, this is what's happening to the brain. Again, much research has been done, and yes, we know for sure it was already proven. The brain is different, and just there are some anatomic changes, there are some physiological changes, there are some connectivity changes, there is some, neurotransmitter changes, and all the things, let me say, they are different in different cases. In this case, I can give several examples. For example, prefrontal area in the case, let me say, is in many cases is bigger. In many cases, we see some publications, and I see myself, because it's the brain is bigger. I mean, 20-30% bigger. In some cases, we see some liquid still in the brain, showing that this is we call it exudative inflammation, or let's call it cirrhosis or exudative inflammation. Then at later stages, we start to see proliferative inflammation. I mean, proliferative meaning the brain is bigger and packed, let me say, with big number of neurons. I mean, in this case, we see the symptoms of overconnectivity in the brain. I mean, we see some areas, for example, which are overconnected. The number of neurons is still very big. But then we see some signs, for example, that there are many different areas in the brain, some amygdala, hippocampus, hypophysis, or pituitary gland, let me say. And in different kids, we see some differences. I mean, there is no kind of rule saying, okay, just in all kids, it will be just this part. We see changes, let me say, in cerebellum, or we see some changes in some kids. In some cases, we see the changes in amygdala. For example, it's in the beginning it's bigger, then over time it starts getting shrunk, let me say, and it influences some symptoms. And so there are so many different things, and there is no way to enumerate, let me say, during the interview all things. But what it says in this case, we need to have brain scientists. Scientists who understand brain anatomy first. Again, it's they exist. Brain physiology, I mean, it's a neurophysiology. Scientists who understand connectivity. Scientists who understand, let me say, so-called synapse, I mean, connections, I mean, what kind of neurotransmitters are involved in each part of the brain, and how, let me say, changes, let me say, in this connectivity, synaptic connectivity, could influence the science of, I mean, in a certain child. And they're different. I mean, we have a big number of different neuromediators, neurotransmitters. And some people say autism is a disorder of connectivity. This is wrong connectivity. Some other would say it's a disease of imbalanced neurotransmitters. I mean, because it's overproduction of, for example, dopamine, or so underproduction of dopamine, overproduction of, for example, norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin, and so many, let me say, different neurotransmitters. Let me say they can be changed.
And last time you mentioned GABA, right? Gamma aminobutyric acid.
Yeah, we have 6 or 7 major neurotransmitters. It's, of course, it's glutamate, it's dopamine, it's serotonin, it's epinephrine, it's norepinephrine, it's acetylcholine, it's gamma aminobutyric acid, let me say, and many other things, let me say, which are, I would call them neurotransmitters of fine tuning. For example, there is like neuropeptides, like enkephalins, which we call them, let me say, opioid type, or we have a substance B, which is so-called pain neuromediator. This is one of the things, for example, and in this case, it's not just a misbalance of neurotransmitters production. It's a misbalance, let me say, of a number of receptors, these specific neurotransmitters. You know, the process is quite simple, but I can explain this way. If there is, let me say, some pathway, which, for example, is, and this pathway is mediated by dopamine, okay? Dopamine, what is dopamine? Dopamine is not a neurotransmitter of so-called of reward. For example, just when we have high level of, relatively high, not too high, amount of dopamine, for example, there's a kind of reward. I mean, for example, we produce a bigger amount, for example, we are more active. I mean, we do, let me use this analogy, okay? It says, okay, let's do something else. Let's do something else because we can get some reward.
Mm-hmm.
This is a type of dopamine.
Okay?
Yeah. And now you can imagine if we have, but all this dopamine is having, let me say, in certain synapses, it has a number of receptors, and they're different. And if there is some genetic change, we need to measure this as well, because it's a matter of overproduction of these receptors that is underproduction, because there are some certain genes responsible for synthesizing these particular receptors, as well as, I mean, for synthesizing this. And if there is no receptor, sufficient receptor, okay, dopamine is getting there, let me say. And what we have, there is no place for, because dopamine is a ligand, let me say, and receptor, they need to connect and produce the effect. And dopamine is being produced, no receptor, let me say, and a huge amount of dopamine is increasing. I mean, let me say, in the synapse, and it's not good because it's a person is not getting a kind of feel of reward. This person is getting, I would say, more irritable. I mean,
Yeah.
it could result in some aggressive behavior. And after, let me say, kind of good feeling, let me say, the person will become, let me say, completely different.
Yeah.
This is just one neurotransmitter. And if you take a look at some other neurotransmitter, for example, it's glutamate. And you can imagine it's with glutamate, let me say, it's a completely different story. What is glutamate? Glutamate is, is glutamic acid is an amino acid. Actually, the great majority of neurotransmitters, they are, produced by conversion of some amino acids into, for example, for dopamine, it's tyrosine, for glutamate, it's glutamic acid, and all things, like we say, for serotonin, it's tryptophan, it's amino acid. And it's interesting from this. Glutamate actually is one of the most important neurotransmitters. It's according to some publications, some people, some professors, up to 80–90% of our pathways are presented by these synapses, so-called glutamate synapses. And glutamate, let me say, is absolutely essential. When you suppress it, let me say, just it's really bad, because in this case, a person is kind of suppressed, let me say, in a bad mood, these type of things, because it's always the case. Because it would mean, for example, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is a kind of neurotransmitter to slow down. Just suppressing glutamate, let me say, is not a good thing as well, because it's a person will behave a kind of strange, let me say, it's being tired, these type of things. And dopamine as well. low dopamine, let me say, tiredness, let me say. It's interesting from another point. Some kids are eating a lot. And you know, just these kids are having low dopamine and they get fatter. But there's another connection. Dopamine actually is playing a role, let me say, in some hormone production, because there is a connection between a nervous system, let me say, and the endocrine system. In this case, high dopamine, let me say, is suppressing cortisol, stress hormone. But low dopamine actually is increasing cortisol. And cortisol is stress hormone. And just a person, let me say, is getting agitated, irritable, aggressive, these type of things. It's one of the mechanisms we need to keep in mind. Okay, this is, and each time when we talk about this, we always need to keep in mind, let me say, this over connection, let me say, and over dependence between neurotransmitters, then between neurotransmitters and hormones, and definitely between all the system and some mediators of the immune system. Because immune system mediators, they have receptors on nervous neurons, and they have receptors on endocrine cells. This is a very complex system. In this case, and just in order just to say what kind of specialists we need to have, talk about glutamate. It deserves special attention. Glutamate is really essential and important, and when it's produced in normal mode, let me say it's our activity and it plays a lot of good things. But glutamate, let me say, is having another and very strong negative feature. Overproduction or excessive amounts of glutamate, let me say, in the brain, let me say, they cause destruction to our neurons. The mechanism is pretty well known. We call it glutamate excitotoxicity. Because we have two types of neurons in the brain. I mean, it's excitatory, let me say, and I would say slowing. I mean, two types. One, let me say, one neuron, let me say, activate our, and another one, let me say, slowing down. It's creating a balance. And as soon as glutamate, for example, just for certain reason, and the reason we'll discuss later, is, in big amount, what's happening in this case? All these neurotransmitters, they sit, let me say, in support presynaptic membrane. Because synapse, let me say, it's a special part, let me say, when we have a connection between one and another neuron and put together. And this synapse, let me say, it's a way how a signal is transferred, let me say, from one neuron to another one. It's a kind of two processes, a so-called electric part, when signal is going, let me say, through neural fiber. It's an electric signal changing charge. And as soon as it's coming to presynaptic membrane, let me say, it's either slows down or producing some glutamate in our particular case. And what's happening in case of glutamate? A huge amount of glutamate, because it's excitatory. What's happening, let me say, it comes, let me say, to certain neuron, and instead of, balancing this, having sufficient amount of some neurotransmitter, it's a huge amount, and nothing like GABA, let me say, to slow down, this neuron is overexcited. Let me use this analogy. It's open. A huge amount of signal is going into neuron, and finally, because it's change in the charge between the surface of the neuron and its cytoplasm, let me say, and it's always excited, and finally it cannot stay excited for a long time, because it is, in 30 minutes, 1 hour, it's destroyed, and we lose the neuron. How it looks, let me say, from outside. At this point, let me say, a person is many different clinical manifestations, but when we see a child who's aggressive, who's overactive, who is irritable, and this is exactly the case of glutamate excitotoxicity. And there are so many other mechanisms, but what we need to understand, this is one of the mechanisms, one of many mechanisms. In this case, okay, but this situation is coming to the point when kids are becoming really aggressive. And that's why I say, okay, neurobiologists, neurophysiologists, molecular biologists of people who understand, let me say, signaling and production of receptors and so on and so forth. This is a field for them. Physicians, scientists, it's their field, and we need to understand in autism, it's not a very big, it's one of the most important parts. And a number of, mediators, a number of connections, this localization of neurons, let me say, how they distribute in the brain, how they affect, let me say, a structure of the brain, let me say. This is a big science, which, let me say, should be a part. It's not the major, science. It's a major science, which actually is critical for understanding autism. But the question is this: yes, we understand the brain is different. It's different from the beginning. But difference, and whether it's possible to do something, it's a big question. And the question is why, for example, autistic kids, let me say, is having such a difference. I wouldn't go into detail, but it's absolutely obvious. There is no single mechanism which would be exactly a mechanism in neurology or neurophysiology which is able to explain this. The only mechanism, whatever people say, it's inflammation, infection, and oxidative stress. Okay, period. Because we know all these mechanisms, and for example, just as soon as somebody is getting deeper into the study, everything is becoming clear. Okay, now we have another set of researchers and physicians. In my opinion, physicians, and you know what's happening? Because when neurologists understand this, they see, for example, some misbalance or disbalance, and they try to use, for example, if they see it's a kind of overexcitement, they try to use, for example, GABA or gabapentin, let me say, to suppress it. But again, excessive amount of GABA is causing, let me say, negative effect either. This is GABA actually is good if it's in balance. As soon as you give more, for example, GABA, what's happening in this case? The child is becoming depressed. A child is developing anxiety. The child, and because it's connected, let me say, to dopamine and some other mediators, a child would start eating more and will become irritable and so on and so forth. That's why, as soon as we start looking at this, let me say, just as if people understand, let me say, they're getting lost. Because it's a number of possible interconnection, overlapping connections between mediators is so huge, and you never know, for example, what you need to push, what you need to add, what you need to remove. Because anytime when you do this and you use risperidone or something like this, and there is no single case when a drug would say, okay, guys, this is the best drug and can solve the problem. There is no single zero. Okay, that's why when we talk about this, okay, guys, we need to look at this situation from a different point. In this case, we're coming to the point, okay, guys, we have neurobiologists, we have neurologists, we have molecular biologists understanding things happening in the brain. We brain genetics. I mean, yes, genetics, and this is but critical people in this case, people who understand neuroinflammation. I mean, so-called people understanding inflammation, immune system of the brain, and people who understand, let me say, how to modulate, that's what they say, modulate, let me say, brain connectivity using different approaches. And what's coming out in this case, okay, guys, what should we do to reduce oxidative stress? How to balance, I mean, using oxidative stress, you can balance, it will take time. People who understand inflammation, and specifically neuroinflammation. People who would understand what microglia activation is, for example, and how to, because it's some destruction of microglia and production of mediators of inflammation or pleiotropic cytokines, and how to balance all things. And it's balanceable. That's what I would say. Okay, we came to this point. Okay, and now we already found we need to have 10 or 12 physician scientists in different fields, correct? Now we come to another point. Okay, guys. If we talk about the period up to 3 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, all is fine. But at some point, different kids, they develop this pathology at different time. This pathology is gastrointestinal problems, the problems with the endocrine system, and developing problem with the immune system, and okay, and this I mean these symptoms are becoming more and more obvious. Start at certain point of child development. What's happening in this case? You remember at some points I said, okay, dysfunctional immune system. Dysfunctional is a kind of broad word. I mean, dysfunctional means that because we still have, let me say, overproduction of inflammatory mediators. It's just for physicians. Most likely it will be clear. It's interleukin-1 beta. It's tumor necrosis factor. It's interleukin-6, interleukin-8, or all things, let me say, which actually initially induce inflammation. But then it's a new cascade of, because they're able, in so-called paracrine method, just activate some other cells, and they will start producing a huge number of, some other cytokines like 17, interleukin 17. They will start producing interferons and so on and so forth. Let me say, and inflammation is, in progress. But remember, I said that these mediators are having receptors on brain cells. They have receptors, let me say, on endocrine cells. And now you can imagine just when, let me say, these mediators start attacking nerves, neurons in the brain. At some point, inflammation is getting converted into autoimmunity. Is at some point, a long process of inflammation results in autoimmunity. We start producing some mediators and cells which are attacking own brain cells. Okay, it's another problem. And this day we call it encephalopathy. Some people call it encephalopathy, or say it's a kind of broad term explaining that something bad is happening to the brain. And symptom-wise, let me say, just it's obviously a huge variety of symptoms, but in many cases, how a child at this point would look. Brain fog. A child, let me say, is not seeing the world, and wouldn't see, let me say, real world. And a child is having a huge of sensory problems. So and they are developing. Initially, it was skin, I would say sensitivity, hair sensitivity. That in many cases, we don't recognize it because the revision is different. I mean, this I can give you an example. For example, a regular child, when he or she sees a picture of 3, 4 different, figures, and a regular child see kind of all these objects simultaneously. For example, let's imagine 3 objects, and they see all of them. An autistic child is different. He or she sees, let me say, a single one. He or she selects the one, for example, and wouldn't pay attention to others.
Mm-hmm.
This is another problem. It means, for example, visual sensitivity is different. And the same situation with, with hearing. Because the child, is having selective hearing. In this case, just many people, when child is not responding to parents or something like this, they always are taken, let me say, to an audiologist, to the physician who check, for example, any problems.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody said that they have no, they have problems, let me say, they're not deaf.
Yeah, they're not going to find a problem with the structure of the ear if it's neurological. Yeah,
could be because and the problem is just simple because the inflammation is, let me say, someplace, let me say, in the pathway between the middle ear, or this internal, let me say, and the area going, let me say, through a kind of structures, let me say, in our middle brain, let me say, into the areas, let me say, in our core, so hearing center and speaking center. And because there's inflammation, that's why kids cannot hear properly. They cannot speak properly. Okay, because a child cannot speak without hearing, because it's how we get, understanding how to speak by hearing.
Yeah.
We are mirroring by hearing, by seeing, by doing. We understand how it's happening. When we are born, for example, just we are, innate. Just we are clear. And the only thing, for example, we see just we're acquiring, let me say, when our parents speak, when we see something, we can connect, let me say, different words, let me say, what we see in action, for example, kind of our understanding of things. In autistic child, for example, they have by small pieces, but they have no, they are not able to connect this together, let me say, in a kind of certain stage. And based on this, we cannot develop our, I would say, associative areas, because there is no association between different things. This is what's happening. And just again, in this case, we need to have people who understand connectivity with this stuff, correct? It's another group of scientists or physicians. But then we come to the point where we see the situation with misophonia, see aggression, see, hyperacusis, and so on and so forth. And even now, for example, when we talk about misophonia, people say we don't know. But again, I'm saying, okay, guys, can you analyze using scientific knowledge? Just and understanding, let me say, connectivity. And what kind of mechanism can be essential? One of the essential ones, just say, just to create this case. And whatever you say, guys, you cannot go between, deeper than inflammation, oxidative stress, formation of, let me say, of pathologic networks, say, and this is a result of, each, it's, this is the things that related to inflammation, microglia activation, all things, let me say, they again a kind of underlying conditions for what we see in this. Here we have another set of physicians, scientists we need to have just in order to understand this. And the last one not just, there are so many things, for example. Not many people mention it, but kids and adults, so young adults with autism, they have a huge number of endocrine problems. And sometimes people just don't realize. I mean, it's interesting from this point. And these changes are quite different. Some kids, they have a problem of overproduction of thyroid hormones. Some of them, let me say, are having lower levels. Some kids are having a problem of cortisol overproduction. And some other kids are having low cortisol levels. Other kids are having problems with testosterone production. I mean, in these cases, just people don't talk about this, but we know, for example, can you imagine a child who is 2-3 years old, let's say, and having some hypersexuality? 2-3 years old
Yeah.
child.
Yeah. It's not normal.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And parents are in shock. They try to beat, but this poor kid can do nothing.
Yeah.
Because it's the system, let me say, just from hypothalamus to the gland, let's say, just and product of some release hormones, let me say, getting into certain areas, let me say, this is the case.
Yeah.
No, people don't pay attention to other things. I mean, just take a look at autistic kids. Many of them are taller than other kids of their age. Some of them are much smaller. Many of them, not all of them, but they're heavier. Some of them very slim. And just they are not in the range, many of them are not in the range of regular kids. A big number of, let me say, within the range, but we see such a huge spectrum of, in terms of weight. Can you imagine this? My younger daughter, older daughter, she's shorter than me. My younger daughter, I mean, just she's taller than me. And I saw this, it's when I talk to parents, they say just our child is much taller than others. You know what it means in this case? It means, let me say, there are some hormones, and the major one, actually somatotropin, which actually, it means it's overproduced, or it was overproduced at a certain time. There are some other hormones can play a role. Okay, we see a set of things, for example, which would relate, let me say, to the endocrine system. And let's take a look at some other systems. That's not many people understand that, for example, autism in some kids can influence, let me say, how heart is working. Many physicians don't know that, for example, heartbeating of autistic kids, let me say, is much more stable. I mean, just for example, whatever happens, for example, being, I mean, nervous in a state of fight or flight, or being calm, let me say, the heart rhythm is the same. It's not changing. Okay, this means there is some problem with autonomous nervous system. Other kids, for example, they, when they get to sleep, I mean, they get wet. And parents complain, why my kids are getting wet when they sleep. Okay, guys, it's a sympathetic system. Because it's, I mean, our sweat glands are innervated just by one system, sympathetic system. You know, it means for just, I don't know, but definitely maybe some parents or physicians would remember simple things as when we get to sleep, when we're still young. At least I remember, and I talked to some parents, just that the child is getting asleep. I say it's coming to the point on the border between, I mean, being, I mean, in the condition not sleep yet, but getting, and suddenly like kind of shock, I mean, just impact, for example, they jump.
Yeah.
And you know, this is just a moment of changing from a sympathetic into parasympathetic system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because when we are kids, let me say, they are not well developed, let me say, and this change, let me say, is taken abruptly. When we got older, we were more already, I mean, adjusted, let me say, and our system is working more properly. But at the same time, for example, it's interesting, kids having there is a term, dysautonomia. Dysautonomia, it means that with kids with autism, they have problems with innervating, I mean, because because all our internal organs, they are, I would say, regulated by our autonomous system. We cannot influence it, because we cannot force our heart to start beating faster or slower. We cannot force our liver, let me say, to produce more, substances and convert food, for example, help let me say, and so on and so forth. It's they act without our participation. But this system has two things. Sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. The first system is support, fight or flight. It's when we in situation. Let's imagine, for example, you're walking through the forest, and suddenly you see a bear. I wouldn't say a Russian bear. just a bear. And what you do? Okay, you have two choices. Okay, fight. Okay, or run away.
Yeah. But
if a bear is big, what do? You are running away, correct?
Yeah.
It's again, and what's happened? Your heart, let me say, started beating very often. Just you getting, some sweat, all things, let me say. In some cases, people say that there is a bear disease. Just somebody who is not able just to start defecating. You heard about this. What was likely at some other people. And what's interesting in this case, because all your system actually is focused on the sympathetic system, saying, okay, do everything possible to run away. But it's interesting, there is only system which actually is not active at this point. It's our gastrointestinal system. It's our stomach. And in this case, when you run, you would think, okay, it would be great to have a cheesecake. Because you're not thinking about this.
No.
And you imagine a different situation. Okay, it's a different parasympathetic system. Actually, it's a calming system.
Mm-hmm.
The system when it's getting active, when we get in sleep, for example, have relaxation, these type of things. In this case, it's a calming system.
Yeah, right.
But the only thing just we have in this case, because all systems, let me say, slow down, his heart is beating, let me say, not so fast. It's the only thing is we have in this situation. Sometimes something, what comes to our mind, okay, it would be a great thing just to eat something, correct?
Yeah, where it's fight or flight and rest and digest.
Yeah,
right?
That's the case.
Yeah,
because this is how it goes. But in case of autism, not in many cases, these systems are, let me say, they are not balanced.
Okay.
In this case, for example, that's what we see, for example, what's happening to us when we get asleep and our parasympathetic system is taking over and we're getting asleep. But a child with autism is not able to sleep for a long time, many of them, not all of them. But in this case, that's our parasympathetic system is, let me say, is not working properly. That's what's happening. Okay, this is, and many other things. I'm not talking about sympathetic system, because our motor function, let me say, are impaired, and this type of things we see in the great majority of cases. It's not just sensory problem. It's not just behavioral problem. problems, let me say, so movement things, let me say, it's a matter of balance. Many kids, let me say, they are not able to ride bicycles. Other kids, it's having a hard time, let me say, to balance their body. Let me say, in space, I mean, just because in this case, it's very difficult for them, let me say, just to go through some. They have a kind of problem, let me say, just to change direction to go, because for them, let me say, it's another problem, because cerebellum, let me say, is having just one, I would say, way to go. They cannot change direction. They're scared. They start crying. This is for them, and many other things. And now, yes, it's when we go to this point, and logic says, okay, guys, if we have just this problem, okay, let's start using anti-inflammatory treatment, okay? Let's use antiviral antibacterial, and the child will get better. Up to a certain point, that's correct. And for younger child, we say the treatment, I wouldn't call it a treatment, maybe somebody who's up to 1 year old, up to 1 year old, could be some supplementation with anti-inflammatory things, let me say, would improve the child's condition. But we're getting older, there's one more process starts taking place. Why I said about hormonal changes, and the problems are in our gastrointestinal tract. In this case, we come to a point which I would call biofilm disease. I would call SIFO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, and there is a new term, maybe it's not used in science yet, but some scientists started mentioning it, so-called IMA. It's intestinal methanogens overgrowth. I mean, these are players, for example, which actually make contribution to make the situation much worse. Okay, because it's initial studies, and some people could say, okay, what's wrong? Of course, I wouldn't say about leaking gut. We know what it is, and then so-called gut to brain access, and this actually still a situation which should be explored, but but the general understanding is already in existence. And what it is, what biofilm disease is, what the SIBA, SIFO, and IM. Just we have, I mean, our gastrointestinal tract is very long. And it's interesting from this point, how many genes we have in our body? 30,000, 32,000. But if you collect all the genes, let me say, in our microbiota, we're talking about millions of genes. And nowadays, of course, it's, I wouldn't say how much, but it's based on even this simple thing. We can say, okay, guys, do we have a big role of this microbiota? Yes, we do. And that's why we go from microbiota is just microbes. We move to microbiome. How this microbiome, for example, having both, let me say, genes of these microbes and our genes, and the environment itself, it's already a microbiome. Some people would say that microbiota is an extra organ, and maybe the most important organ in our body. And now we imagine, for example, what's happening to a child with autism. Remember, I talked about dysfunctional system. And this child, some of them are taken from cesarean section. And what they get staphylococcus from skin, they get streptococcus, and just some other things, for example, which are normally shouldn't be in our gastrointestinal tract. And keep in mind that we have hundreds or thousands of different species, and Another thing, for example, over a short period of time, we start acquiring some microbes and creating our own microbiome. In normal regular situation, our microbiome is being formed by, let me say, at the time when child is going through, through from the womb, let me say, and collecting some healthy microbe and creates a microbiome. But in case of autism, we have a very important problem. In this case, dysfunctional, I wouldn't go into detail about dysfunctional immune system actually is making, let me say, our gastrointestinal tract wide open for creating a pathologic microbiota. Some people would say, okay, but it's an interesting phenomenon. I guess if you ask physicians and parents, I have no idea whether somebody paid attention to it. But when I said, okay, how often your child is having viral diseases? They say 0. But they say for the last 2-3 years, we don't remember, let me say, any respiratory infection. Okay, it's an interesting question. And some people would say, okay, I was so happy because the immune system of my child is great. But I said, in this case, take a look at your microbiota, because there are 2 different ways of measuring microbiota. American companies are measuring by genetic analysis, and they're quite, I wouldn't say tricky. They would never say, okay, this microbe is pathogenic, and this one, let me say, is good. And they try, let me say, just understand that nobody wants to go to jail, let me say, or to pay big bucks for giving them information. In Russia and some other countries, they use a different method. It's called liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry. It wouldn't give, let me say, a wide range of, but it's more precise. It would give about 40-50 different microbes, but the microbes of high importance. For example, based on that method, we can identify Clostridium difficile. We know about this correct Clostridium difficile. It's actually is one of the players in autism. We can identify Egertella lenta, recently discovered, actually is a pathogen typical for. And I mentioned just the ones which are absolutely obvious, let me say, having negative impact. Then Kingella, another very bad microbe. Then we see Staphylococcus aureus. We see Streptococcus mutans. We see hemolytic Streptococcus. Then we start seeing some things, for example, which we wouldn't consider a big problem, but they are a big problem. Can you imagine Clostridium tetani, the microbe which actually is causing and producing some tetanus toxin, which is very toxic to the nervous system. Then we see Clostridium histolyticum, yes, it's producing a number of toxins. We see Clostridium botulinum in some cases. Okay, just instead of improving our skin, I mean, just they produce neuropathic changes, let me say, not by, making our faces young. They produce the same things, let me say, and the gastrointestinal tract is not moving. Okay, and we see Candida. Candida, because let me say, it's a big problem. It's candidosis, let me say, it's a big thing. Then we see more Aspergillus. Aspergillus is highly toxic, and just if you start collecting, I mentioned just a few, but you can imagine how many others we have in our gastrointestinal tract. In this case, the question is this: it's kind of our frozen mind. Okay, on one side we don't have viral infections. On the side, another side, we have, let me say, a huge number of bacteria which are sitting, let me say, in our gastrointestinal tract. And the biggest problem, these bacteria producing toxins, they are able, let me say, to penetrate through tight junctions in our gastrointestinal tract. They are getting, in addition, they are getting, let me say, in our from the colon, they are getting in our gastrointestinal, upper part. It shouldn't contain, let me say, a big number of the bacteria. They are not, let me say, they are not having any mechanisms to protect. And this, as soon as they get into this area, its concentration is 100 times higher, 1,000 times higher, let me say, they are able to penetrate through the epithelium and produce this thing, let me say, into the blood circulation, toxins. And in some cases, they are able to get by themselves. In this case, what we have this bacteria, and is we have in the blood circulation. Even more so invasive diseases, and there is a high probability that these microbes are forming biofilms, not just inside of the gastrointestinal tract. They create biofilms, say, in some other or outside of our gastrointestinal tract. And this thing could be continued. Okay, your question.
No, I was gonna say I can do like 5 more minutes because I got another interview at 4. So we can do like 5 more minutes if you want.
Okay. In this case, I would say, okay, this is just now we start seeing a picture, yeah, because and the microbes we have, they can be officially they're not considered pathogenic. They're so-called conditionally pathogenic, opportunistic pathogens, and they produce something, for example, which some ammonia, some acetone, and so on and so forth. And when people say, okay, why we have hepatomegalyc syndrome? Okay, guys, if you have ammonia getting into your liver, what are you going to have with your liver? Of course, it's liver damage. That's why, let me say, there is even a term, hepatic encephalopathy, because it's, brain fog, let me say, not working, brain not working properly. At the same time, we have, say, a huge size of the liver. Okay, this is what, and you see, and a number of pathologies, and I would call vicious circles, they are taking place on molecular level, on cellular level, on organ levels, on tissue levels, let me say, on symptoms levels. All things, and they're all interconnected. Okay, that's what we have. And molecular connected to cellular, cellular with tissue and so on and so forth. And in this case, that's why when we talk about, you can imagine how many other scientists we need to have. Okay? And this is just forming such a multidisciplinary group because, just this type of things took place. Just one university, good university, having good knowledge, collecting all these scientists and okay, guys, let's create a model of autism. And this knowledge is known. And just as soon as, for example, when I understood all things, up to the point, for example, when it was sufficient to me, I designed treatment. And in this case, you remember last time I said outrageous in terms of antibiotics or antivirals, antibacterials. Now my question is this. Has somebody imagined that using some simple things, like Respirador or some supplements to kill biofilms, to kill CFO, are creating huge, thick layers of pathogenic microbes producing huge amount of toxins. And these biofilms, let me say, they are kind of a matrix combining bacteria, yeast, fungi, and viruses. And if some people say, okay, let's use antivirals, but you can use antivirals and bacteria will start to regrowing. You can use antibacterials and viruses would be overgrowing. In this case, we, let me say, in a kind of limbo. As soon as we understand that we use this approach, get rid of many of these microbes, anti-inflammation, let me say, then modulation of things, let me say, already not medical, I mean, not psychotropic drugs, I mean, just supplements, guys. Passiflora, L-theanine, I mean, monolaurin, N-acetylcysteine, and so on and so forth. They are playing a very good role. They are not pushing the imbalance. As soon as people understand this, I mean, this is the problem of autism is gone. In this case, I have. That's why next time we'll have that. We continue
Beautiful.
talking to new parents. We'll bring back, let me say, the ones you interviewed before, and they will tell you what kind of changes took place in a month, 2 months. Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay. This is what I'll talk to somebody in London. She's Russian, but a British citizen. And she will tell you about 1 year treatment using my principle, and her child is neurotypical now. I mean, and we have so many others.
Oh yeah, no, we've got 1 million to go, and we'll have Idai come back and translate for us.
Yeah, and then notice this. I would ask Idai to translate what we discussed in Russian.
Yeah.
Many people, they're happy saying, "Can stop speaking English because we don't understand what you say."
Well, I need you to speak English because I don't understand a word of Russian. So
no, absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'll ask Idai, maybe she would see synchronic translation into interpretation into Russian. And next time, if it's next week, I'll talk to Anastasia. Looks like it's start time is coming, and she says it should be available.
Beautiful.
Okay, she will talk about her child.
All right. Well, I'll send you an email. We'll set that one up, and I'll also send you an email about Dr. Hatfill.
Oh, okay. It's interesting to talk to him. It's I do remember a horrible case. Can you imagine this? It was such a huge attack on him. At some point, I became absolutely convinced it was because initially when FBI people come to me, I said, guys, I cannot do this because he's not the one. And because at some point, we both, he and I, we helped FBI and CIA guys, analysts like me, Sanders, we're helping understand by threat. And you know, just because not simultaneously. Sometimes when I was coming, he was first talking about something. Then it was my turn. And suddenly this information started person of interest. I do remember this. And just when I got some talks with some FBI people, and they was saying, I was saying, guys, I cannot. It's, you know, he's not the one.
Yeah.
Close to this.
Yeah.
But they were so convincing. I said at some point, I said, okay, guys, it's like, I had no idea, maybe they were right. Because it's, you know, when huge number of people say, no, we know this, we know this. I said, okay. And I was really happy when FBI said, okay, guys, we were wrong.
Yeah.
It would be interesting just to talk. It was a long time ago. But I cannot imagine what he felt because I was going not through the absolutely identical situation, but you know, just you can imagine a huge number of self-proclaimed investigators coming to me asking to sign the book.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at me, following me, I mean, writing some kind of crazy stories on the in the internet. FBI invited, let me say, for the interview or just having polygraph, I mean, checking whether I've learned something. Or some guys in the meeting looking at me, I understood some profilers. You know, it was, to me, it was not worrisome, but it was so funny. because when you feel there is nothing, but and if guys come into my office and suddenly they saw some book, it was by hand, and look, show it, saying, okay, these guys have this book. They didn't even realize it was.
I wrote it.
This
That's my book.
yeah.
Of course I have it.
No, they didn't ask. I mean,
Oh.
they're talking about something different, but
Yeah.
looking at each other. It was a funny time.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll email you. I can't wait for that episode. That episode's going to be fun. And
send Steve my best regards. I mean, just
absolutely.
He has gone through such a horrible time, and of course it's great he survived. Let me say.
Absolutely, I will. And but for now, let's wrap this one up. I gotta run. And Dr. Alibek, I'll email you the links to this video when it's up. We'll set up the next episodes. We'll set up the Hatfill episode. And thank you for your time, sir.
Okay, great. If we have a next episode on autism next Wednesday, it would be absolutely perfect.
Okay, all right. I'll look at my calendar and see if I can do that. I probably can.
Perfect.
All right, Dr. Alibek, take care.